less interested and, it's providing less value, right? And so I proposed the idea behind automated reporting. And, a lot of people, when you think of automated reporting, you think of like canned text or like, just the same duplicate stuff across multiple customers. But, with logic, you could basically tailor things to different people based on what you've seen in the pen test. So I never forget, I went on site on the West Coast and I did a pen test and saw so much stuff that it was going to take me like 2 weeks to write the report. That was probably going to be the longest report in my career. And so rather than like spending all of that time, copying and pasting the icons back and forward, asking this consultant, hey, do you have an updated finding for this and all of that nonsense? I spent the entire week studying Word and Mail to like basically break down Word documents and build them back up to the point where I was able to do that pretty efficiently, and eventually had a reporting framework that was saving me more and more time over time. And so with the platform, basically, when I decided to start it, I was like, well, when I think about it, there's a lot of things that I do. There's a lot of things that I do over and over and over when I go on site, some of the same things, right? A lot of pen testers have their host discovery techniques, whether it's, ping sweeps, ARP scans, whatever the case is, they have a technique. And once they get that back, then things change, right? Depending on what you see open, things change based on that. So I know a lot of pen testers have their own tools to kind of automate a lot of things like OSINT, things like that. But I wanted to take that and escalate it to other things like actually exploiting things, getting the results, analyzing the results, figuring out if I need to go even further. And so that's pretty much how we got started. And when I first started the platform, I kind of was like everybody else. Well, automation, you still need a human. You probably can't do a lot of stuff, but I think as we've been able to prove it over time, it really hits me like every month. I'm like, wow, we really automated that. It's crazy.
Yeah. I remember when Saint Exploit came out, and they had kind of like a auto router built into their appliance. So it was sort of along the same lines, but they didn't do the automated reporting. They didn't automate a lot of things, although it did do auto routing once it found vulnerable services or whatever. But you had to initiate scans. So how do you set yourself apart from, like, let's say Rapid7 or Nexpose or people like Saint Corporation?
Yeah, so I've done a lot of 1099 work for a lot of companies. Worked at a few. I've got a lot of friends from H4unt who have gone over to other companies, and so typically, we try to. So I know automated pen testing is still like a new thing, right? You hear it, but you don't really believe it until you see it. And so we really try to push even further when it comes to exploitation, man-in-the-middle attacks, cracking hashes. We try to get that in people's faces so they can actually see that, hey, this is possible. Sometimes we'll come across a company who's like, yeah, we use Nessus for this and Rapid7 tools for this, but then we show them like what we do in the product and the report and all of that, and it really sets it apart by automating the exploitation, the man-in-the-middle attacks, being able to do that intelligently without having to just massively like throw things at every system. So. But yeah, we focus on like the efficiency, right? I know a lot of automated tools don't present like the best reports. And so we've spent a lot of time in making sure that the reports are actually valuable, right? At the end of the day. So also the efficiency, right? The time that it takes. I mean, we've taken an 8-hour reporting process and reduced it to like not having to do anything at all except QA it from time to time. So, but yeah, those are some of the things.
Very cool. So have you built like a community around the platform? Can people contribute, or, is there an API? I mean, what else is there to the platform that you're going to share with the community?
Yeah, so right now we haven't done anything like as far as opening up any kind of projects to like the community just yet. But so right now we pretty much develop everything in-house. We control everything in-house, and we just let partners kind of get access to the tool to run it on our clients' networks. Yep.
Cool. So anybody else have any questions for Alton? Ryan, I think Ryan would start. So go ahead.
Hey man, sorry about that. Hey, so I was curious, with all the automation stuff that your company, can you hear me all right? Yeah. With all the automation that you're doing with these processes, does that mean that you can run the team with less people? And if so, does that create opportunities for new guys to come in the ground level, or?
Yeah. So basically, all of the stuff that consultants typically do, like for the first few days or even weeks, depending on like how long the engagement is, they can use the platform to basically automate that ground level work, right? Rather than looking to see if the system has eternal blue, rather than spending the time even exporting it, right? We could do that for them, and they could just basically take the results and be like, all right, well, let me look at some printers to see if there's some email addresses I can enumerate and start looking at application stuff. So we take a lot of that work that they would typically do. I spend a lot of time analyzing and automating that.
That's sweet. So when you got third parties coming in, how do you guarantee your quality of service for your product? Like, do you oversee the results that they then pass on to their clients, or how do you keep that brand shiny?
Yeah. So when we first started the platform and we started automating the reporting process, we would typically QA every single report just to make sure that there are no like errors in the tools or something said it was vulnerable and it wasn't. And then over time, we've kind of went into a different process where we actually just like set flags depending on certain things that happen in the reports. So typically, if there's something that is kind of unusual across multiple engagements, we'll take a look at that to make sure that, the results are accurate. But otherwise, if it's like a very common, like attack surface between different customers, then we've set up processes already to automate like the QA of that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so it does. So third and last question, how do you let C-levels know like the return on investment for your service? Like, the automation thing it's not the traditional route that they're used to going down. How do you explain to them like this is going to get rid of the low-hanging fruit and it's worth your money?
Yeah. So I know a lot of times like executives, they spend like tens of thousands of dollars for a pen test, right? And it typically is like a 2-3 week turnaround depending on the engagement. And so one of the things that we talk about is the continuous model, right? So a lot of companies would do continuous pen testing, but it's just so expensive, right? Who's going to pay 10 grand every 3 months to do a pen test, right? That's just it's just a little bit too much. So we like to kind of mention that, we could, because we're automating things, we can take the price down significantly, which would allow you to do more of a continuous pen test, right? So if you do a pen test in January and something comes out significant in February, right? Maybe Nessus won't see it because it requires authentication and they're not doing authenticated scanning. Or if we do a pen test and let's say we were able to exploit something, then we could see that before your next annual pen test. So I think the continuous model really kind of hits home for a lot of executives.
Yeah, I think it's really good what you're doing because it brings down that entry level to actual quality pen testing. Like, so smaller businesses can have this service available to them as well.
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, we appreciate it. Definitely.
With HP, we did a lot of going into companies and building their red teams for them. And if we would have had an automated platform to take care of the pen testing side of it, could have gotten deeper with the actual red teaming and threat intel, because a lot of those tasks you're talking about, like the scanning, like if you go into an ISP and you're doing it like internal pen test, and you have 20 net blocks. You're looking at a week of scanning. It's not
Right.
It's not something you can babysit 24 hours a day.
Yeah,
so
it's
automation,
expensive.
yeah, expensive. I did one up in Rochester, New York, for an ISP, and the amount of IP addresses that we had was just insane, and they wanted everything covered. So with a platform like that would make things a lot easier. Just set things to go and fire. And another good bonus point, and I think it will sell to any pen tester, is the fact that the reporting, right? So I don't know a single tester that loves pen testing and doing reports. Like the pen testing, but the reporting, no. And especially when you get into like FedRAMP, right? You do FedRAMP assessments, and
What's FedRAMP? Sorry,
FedRAMP is like a government kind of a pen test that rates them if you're a government service provider. And it's all government compliance and databases and check marks, and it's a nightmare. But the reporting for that, it takes weeks.
So. Yeah, and with the reporting, I know we all can relate to like spending all of this time on a report, submitting it to QA. QA is like, oh, this should be a medium. You changed it to a medium. Oh, you forgot to add, adjust the chart. Like, who really wants to deal with that? You know what I mean?
And then you get some of them that want to argue the findings. Even though it's the CVE says this, and it's a critical, they want to argue the findings for another 2 weeks. So
yeah, or if they didn't update it, or they updated it and they didn't send it out, and you got to find out who has a finding for this. That's ridiculous, you know?
yeah, now if we can just get like a clone of me or you and have them talk to the client as well, we'll be done, man. So where do you
Exactly.
see the industry going from here? You know, I hear a lot of people tossing around the buzzword AI and
Mhm.
machine learning and stuff like that. I'm from the thought school that true AI doesn't exist yet, that we're still looking for that.
Mhm.
And I think it'll be a while before we see that in our industry where it's truly AI.
Mhm.
So where do you see it going from here as far as pen testing, and how far do you want to see automation taken?
Yeah. So I think it's been very interesting over the last like few years, but when it comes to automation, like if you Google automated pen testing like once every 6 months, you'll be surprised at like how many different companies are trying to get into it. And so I think like a lot of the bigger companies who are spending, a lot of money on salaries, and then the clients are spending a lot of money on those engagements, they're really going to see it kind of hit, in a few years when you start to see a lot more companies, start to get more market share, when it comes to pen testing. And so, and again, just kind of going back to like all of those manual tasks, you're going to see pen testers who are working at companies get tired of reporting, and they're going to go out and build their own thing, or
Mhm.
they're going to, are they going to learn how or get somebody to help them out or something? So I feel like, especially at the pace that things come out these days, vulnerabilities and, you forget to check something else because you were paying attention to this. So I think we're going to see a lot more automation in place in the next few years when it comes to pen testing, because it's so expensive.
Mhm.
And it's not fair that smaller companies can't afford it because they're so expensive. So they're just targets sitting out there, hoping for the best.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think when you talk about targets sitting out there, that brings up another point. Let's talk about SolarWinds,
Mhm.
and let's talk about what's happened since then, and how important it is to get a real pen test and to actually look at the data and try not to fight the data. Um, I think with SolarWinds, we're seeing a lot of people. I know there's a lot more affected that's actually coming out and saying it.
Mhm.
But also with the Florida Water Treatment Center,
Mhm.
if they would have been doing routine pen tests, they would have seen that TeamViewer was probably very vulnerable, because I doubt they've like patched it since last August.
Mhm.
So let's talk about that and how the tool reports the vulnerabilities, right? Because I know
Mhm.
a lot of tools will just report the vulnerability in the day it came out. One thing that I wanted to see in a tool is a breakdown of when that client or when that company that created the tool thinks that vulnerability should be remediated in what
Mhm.
window, 30, 60, 90. A lot of people set their own
Mhm.
scoring system internally for time frame for patching.
Mhm.
But I think with a pen tester, it would be really cool to be able to put that in a report and say, hey, look, this has been out since last June,
Mhm.
and you're way past the 90-day window, and this is a critical, like, more validation on that vulnerability. What do you think about
Right.
that?
Yeah, I totally agree. Because a lot of companies, they're just on vulnerability scans, and like they see vulnerabilities, but it don't really mean anything to them just yet, right? They see it, but they're like, yeah, we'll get to it. They don't really know what the potential impact is just doing a vulnerability assessment. The vulnerability assessment just says, hey, this is vulnerable. It's pretty bad. If somebody was to exploit it, then it could be real. It could be even more bad, right? But with the pen test, they could actually take that, right, and actually demonstrate the impact. Like when you show somebody, access to confidential data, social security numbers, credit, PII, like that hits home a lot harder than saying that, hey, if somebody was to exploit something,
Yeah.
this could happen. So I think, that's really like the value that we try to provide in the pen test is, hey, this is really bad. Like I know Nessa said, this might be a medium, but this is how we took that medium and we actually did something with it. Here's your password, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny you say that, because a lot of those tools actually don't take in consideration the environment around it, right? So it'll see a vulnerability
Exactly.
and be like, oh, this is a low, but the way that they have the network architected, it could absolutely be like a medium, or vice
Exactly.
versa. Yeah.
Exactly.
Um, so that's another thing that pen testers I know have had issues with clients before, explaining the criticality of vulnerabilities, and you really can't fight with a CVE score.
Right.
But I always tell a client, here's the vulnerability, and you have to look at and analyze it and see if it falls within your acceptable risk profile.
Right.
If it does, great. At least you know about it and it's there on paper. I've done my job. Um,
Exactly.
So yeah,
Yep.
like I think that's some of the big pain points for pen testers. That, and we've always been kind of automating to a certain extent. I wouldn't say automating, but maybe scripting, tying tools together, looking for open ports, and then probing those ports. Just stringing that together with Bash script, just on the fly. And a lot of companies actually look for that when they're hiring pen testers, is the ability to write on the fly or create something to help the work get easier. Is that something that you thought about when you were building this tool, or was it, this was something you wanted to break away and go do, or was it something that helps you do your job and it became something bigger than you thought?
Yeah, kind of like kind of like a lot of tools out there. Like like you eventually write a small piece of script that does something, and then next thing you know, you run it, and it's like, oh, then you start to do the next thing manually, and you're like, I wonder if I could expand it there. So that's kind of how I started off with me. It was like, well, I wonder if I could just automate reporting. And then I got bored of that, so I was like, all right, so we got that out the way, right? I wonder if I could automate this. All right, done that. And then I think the more manual stuff that we find ourselves doing, the more we want to try to automate that, and that's kind of just how it is. And you combine that with the fact that I love coding, and it's just, I forget what day it is, at the end of that.
Very cool. Jeremy, do you have any more questions?
Yeah, so I know in the industry, because I get asked this so many times when we do a call, people are always asking, well, what's the difference between a vulnerability scan and a penetration test? Is it just me, or is that like a common confusion in the industry between those two? I know, like, for industries that are regulated, I mean, those guys, they know the difference, right? But your typical small to medium sized business, I get asked that question a lot, and I'm always trying to find creative ways to explain it. So I'm just curious to see if you guys run into that same challenge, and like, what analogies do you use to like clearly get the point across, so that when you're explaining it to a non-tech person, they get the difference and they understand the importance of each.
Yeah. So one of my analogies is, and I know it's probably lame, but it works. But 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 I like to say, a vulnerability assessment will walk up to the house and say, hey, it'll knock on the door, it'll twist the doorknob and say, oh, it'll crack the door open a little bit. Oh, the door is unlocked. And then it'll call up the person and say, hey, your door is unlocked. If somebody goes in there, they might find all kinds of stuff, right? And the person's like, oh yeah, I leave the door unlocked all the time. It's never happened. But the pen test is more like, hey, your door's unlocked. And by the way, I got your car keys. I got your Lamborghini. Everything that you love, is in my back seat right now. So I like to use that because it paints the picture that vulnerability assessments tell you something's bad, but the pen test actually takes that,
show it,
and finds all of the good stuff. Yep, the stuff that will keep you up at night.
Yep. And it normally does too. Ryan, do you have anything?
Yeah, man. So does your company also do end user education, like phishing education, stuff like that, to bring the whole company's security posture up, or are you just strictly pen testing?
Yeah, so we do offer like some traditional assessment, like wireless assessments, application assessments, mobile assessments. I actually built a platform called vFish. Actually, that was the first product that we built. And, so we're a small business. And so that was like the first thing I built. And I realized that, phishing, like building another phishing platform is it doesn't really make a lot of sense because there's so much stuff out there that does it already and for free. And so we have something that we can, help, like if somebody wants to do a phishing assessment, we can, pair something like that up with that. And then we also have some partners as well that help us out with like, providing training and education to some of the users like after phishing assessment. But we don't do it directly, but we do have some partners that do the phishing, the education side of it.
Very cool. Like KnowBe4, that type of company?
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Yeah.
I want to know, what was the craziest, so you also did red teaming, right? Which is a combination of everything. It's just whatever tricks you've got in the hat, just try to get into my company and find something sensitive. So what was like the craziest like red team engagement or operation that you were a part of?
Yeah, I think for me, the thing that always comes to mind is, and it's kind of funny because me and the contact actually still communicate today, and this happened like 5 years ago. One of the assessments that we were doing, we were trying to get access into the building as part of like the scope and what we were doing. And so, we weren't really successful. Well, we were successful actually at the other buildings. And there was the last one that was like super secure, had all these security guards, very intimidating, right? You would literally walk there and turn around because you would be like that's not going to happen. So this part made me nervous because I went up, and a lot of people get nervous on like on-site social engineering engagement. What's going to happen? What are you going to ask me? Things like that. But right before that day, I got into a scenario where somebody didn't hear like the badge reader go off when I walked in behind them, and they caught me, and they were like, "Hey, I didn't hear anything go off." So that night, I went on YouTube, found a guy doing RFID hacking, found the sound, and I clipped the sound, just the sound, put it on my phone, and then the next day I went to that last location, and I literally walked in, and I had like my ID just like just in my hand, just kind of like this, and I pressed the play button as I did that, like behind them. But I had to like delete every other song on my phone, right? Because I didn't want like Rick Ross stuff playing.
That would have been awesome.
Yeah, but that was very.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah,
so the file, and also people like probably need to know too is that you can make your own audio file as well, right, just by recording the signal. And you can build that into a Raspberry Pi on a small antenna and go to town. That's really cool.
This is the creativity of hackers that I love to hear about.
I got another one that might be interesting too.
Go ahead.
So we're doing but this was like more of a scope-based engagement, but we had on-site social engineering, and then we also had wireless assessments, and then like internal network pen testing in scope. So I spent the morning, trying to figure out where people are going, leaving and things like that. And I managed to get inside of a building and got inside the break room, just kind of walking around and, just seeing who's going to catch me. After a period of time, like nobody caught me. And I was like, well, I wonder if I could just do the wireless assessment while I'm here, I mean, I'm in the building. I mean, why should I call a client and say, hey, meet me down here? Let me just get started now, save some time. So at that point, I didn't care if I got caught because I had already accomplished the goal, which was to get in and, plug into the network, things like that. So I actually found like a cubicle that was, nobody was in there. And I got bold. I started setting up my wireless equipment, got the antennas going, the alpha adapter.
Nice.
And I literally completed the wireless assessment like at that time. And so it was like an hour and a half later, a group of security guys walk up and they, I see them coming. It's a team of them. I'm just like, oh man, like I hope they're just going to get coffee or something, right? And they stop at a desk, and they're just looking at me. They're like, who are you? And I like froze up, right? They brought me up to the front, tried to call my primary point of contact. He wouldn't answer the phone. I almost died, like at that time. So that was awesome. Another crazy moment. Yeah.
We had a bus, a metro line in downtown Houston, Houston bus station. And I would take a bus from one side of town all the way to the other at like 5 o'clock in the morning. So I knew the bus drivers were kind of tired. So you have an app and you can buy your tickets online. And the only thing that shows it's a valid ticket is this bus that's animated and it has a date, right? So I just went in there and did my own little animation and changed the date, and I rode free for like a month. But I just want to see if I could do it. Wouldn't I needed to? It's just like, can I get around this? Like this is ridiculous.
Exactly.
Kind of goes back to Alton when he was like 11 or 12. It's like you're doing it just to see if you can do it, right?
Right. Yep.
You guys are like kids trying to like push the buttons and see what your limit is.
No, that's the curiosity is what forms us into who we are, really.
Exactly. Yeah.
I remember I was 3 or 4. And my grandmother had a tear gas gun in her closet, and I was always a kid that was plundering and getting in trouble and getting into stuff. And they were in one part of the house and I heard the gun go off, and they come in there. I shot myself in the face with a tear gas gun at a little age, but I was just like shocked that it worked. I was like, oh, cool. So yeah, like get you into trouble as well.
Yeah.
So does anybody have questions for Alton? I'm looking at the chat. The chat's open. All the messages, questions will come to the host, and I'll relay it on to Alton. So if you have any questions, drop them in the chat box.
Can you walk me through a social engineering engagement? Like, do they outline a scope for it, or is it open slather? Can you just like pretend to be Hugo, the pool cleaner, or like what's the go?
Yeah. So the first 2 years of my career, I did a lot of on-site social engineering assessments for banks and credit unions. They were really targeting banks and credit unions. And so the common thing for us was pest control, right? You walk in, you just start doing your thing. You got to, we had like a fake invoice sheet. We had a fake ID. We put on like khaki, like khaki pants, and just look like a pest inspector kind of person. And so we would just walk in there and just start like looking around and taking notes and stuff like that. And just, we'll keep an eye out trying to see where where there's an unattended, room is, right? And we'll just eventually get there, and we'll just stand there for a minute, and we'll, take pictures. Hey, here's the proof of me getting access to the network, the network jack. And then, we did that a lot, but yeah, they're very scary sometimes. So. Yeah.
What's really cool too is if you go to eBay and you can find like UPS uniforms, you can find Verizon work shirts, and man, eBay was my friend when it came to social engineering. We got into an AT&T data center and said we need to fix some servers, and we had Verizon work shirts on, and they actually gave us like let us in because we had the right badge. We had scoped out the badges, but we're in a totally competing like T-shirt. Some people they just don't think that's the weakest link.
It's so crazy.
Oh, you go, man.
It's so crazy when you think of on-site social engineering. You think of like physically going on site and trying to get access to something that only authorized people should be having access to. It sounds crazy. The first thing most people would think is, man, never. I couldn't see myself walking inside a Chase Bank and getting access behind a teller line. But it's so surprising when you actually do it. Yep. People are afraid to confront you and say, hey, who are you? And like out of like, I don't know, maybe 80 on-site social engineering assessments, I've only had like a handful of people actually walk up to me and ask me what I was supposed to, what was I doing there? So it's crazy.
Yeah. Red teaming is a lot of fun too, because you get to mix in all the aspects, social engineering, physical, and you get to do some complex attacks. And that, to me, red teaming is where the passion's at. That's where I like to be is red teaming. Ethical hacking, pen testing is okay. I do that for money in the bank or whatever, but the real passion would definitely be formulating an all around collaborative attack scenario, red teaming. But you're right, especially like back in the day, banking was really important when it came to social engineering. I worked for one of the big banks in the US, and we were constantly testing our own stuff. Let's see.
So it looks like Frenchie's got a question. He's saying, how are you refining and teaching the AI that they are building with the system to fine tune and not have things slip through the cracks? So yeah, Alton, why don't you talk about, I know you're deploying VPN tests in a bunch of different environments. So how do you add new exploits so that the tool continues to kind of be smarter for like the next customer? How do you integrate? So how does the tool get smarter? Tell us how that works. Right?
Yeah, so,
I think I phrased that question right.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's basically, whenever it comes to like our automated platform, I always like to kind of bring it back to traditionally, right? If you're a consultant, you go on site, you run a tool, or you try a new exploit and you get different results, you're going to learn, oh, wow, this is different. Maybe I should be on the lookout for this next time, or I should, so using this tool and start grepping for this string, whatever. So it's pretty much the same way, right? Whenever we, integrate new things into the product, well, first of all, we test it to make sure it works. We don't want to just like start, throwing up zero logging on everybody's DCs without, without testing things. So, but we also set a lot of flags too. So whenever there's things that, that don't commonly get exploited because those vulnerabilities aren't really that common in those particular networks, we usually jump in the middle of the pen testing and just to look at the results, and we learn from that, and we can adapt, like, change the code on the fly, and even of course in development, so that next time that scenario happens, we know how to adjust to it. If it's like post-exploitation or, escalation privileges, lateral movement, we can actually set breakpoints all throughout the process to make sure that everything runs perfectly smooth. And, once we've done that, more and more enough times, then we can start to remove some of those breakpoints so that we can set breakpoints later down the road when it comes to like extracting data.
So when it comes to the platform itself, you're only doing network right now, right?
Exactly.
You haven't gotten into Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, any of that stuff.
No, but I think we'll probably end up automating wireless testing. It's so easy. It's one of those things you can write a checklist for somebody and they can go and do it. The craziest part about wireless testing is getting the alpha adapter to even work. Once you've got it working, you're good to go.
Yeah, the chipset is the hardest thing, especially like I do a lot of testing with Raspberry Pis. And so sometimes the chipset can be a little finicky. Yeah, that was one of my biggest questions was, modularity. You're going to be able to add SDR or RF or Bluetooth and stuff like that. Wi-Fi should not be a problem. That should be super easy.
Yeah.
Maybe even Bluetooth, because it's pretty much the same technology, just a little dumber.
Right.
So I don't know. It'd be cool to see how things evolve over the next 5-10 years. Now, is your company VC funded or no, strictly financed through your means? That's awesome.
Just me. Just took my savings and went at it.
That's
no,
awesome.
I wish it was like that. But
That's awesome.
Yep. Just so I worked at a company that had a lot of VC funding, and like it became like all about paying the investors back.
Mhm.
And we started putting out crap reports, crap stuff, and we weren't training people. It was just a disaster. And I know that's not all that it's all about, but that was kind of like some of my exposure to it.
Mhm.
And so when I started my company, and I wasn't really educated on like who do I even go to ask for anything, right? So I just basically took my savings at the time and just went at it. I remember the last day of my last job, I literally got a laptop, my personal laptop, because I was using the company laptop, and say, I don't care what happens, as long as I have my laptop, I'll be fine. So
Yeah.
if I got clothes, I have my laptop, I'll be good. I'll figure out a way to make it work. So that's pretty much the attitude I had.
Yeah.
So when I say VC, I know that Ryan had a question. It's actually a venture capital, the people who sometimes finance startup companies and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What I found with startups is that when they did have VC backing, the different rounds, things got really critical.
Right.
And it seemed like we were always chasing to satisfy the investors instead of actually working freely on the product and enjoying what we're doing.
Exactly.
So I try to stay away from VC companies just because of that specific reason. I like to have fun.
Is it because
Exactly.
of the sharing of the vision? You've got a vision for an idea, and then with the VC comes in, and then you lose control of that ultimately, or?
Yeah, the advisory board, VC funders. I mean, everybody kind of plays a part in it. If you have an extended executive team to help you get through M&A, merger and acquisition.
Yeah. And there's like milestones you've got to hit too. So
Right.
you find that like, whereas if you were, self-funded, 100% of your time goes towards product development and growing your business. Whereas the moment you get funded, about 30% of your time now gets sucked away in doing board presentations and, forecasting and projections so that you can present to these people that are giving you all this money that you have a plan in place. So it does take a lot of time away from the core of what you're trying to achieve, I think.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that capital, I mean, getting like a $2.5 million funding could definitely help you grow, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a double-edged sword for me, and I see the pros and cons for both.
Yep.
So Alton, if you got that $2.5 million funding, where would you go? Where would you expand your business? What would be the first ticket item on the list?
Yeah, I think for us it would be developers. They're super expensive. They're kind of hit or miss. I feel like for like marketing, sales, we've been really good at like expanding our team in those areas, and we find good people and things that when it comes, I don't know what it is, but developers. And so here's the thing too, like and this has been interesting. So I wanted to automate pen testing, but the minute we put a dashboard to it, we realized that, oh my goodness, this was going to be a product thing, right? Like everybody was going to be all about the UI. So I think we would definitely pour some into that because, I find myself like kind of, looking at more stuff in the front end than I do with the back end. So I think we could definitely, we could do a lot we have a pretty cool product, but I think
But it's crazy though that you say that, because as a pen tester, I don't like the front end. I would much rather deal with the data. I don't need the nonsense. And a lot of companies, not to put names to people who put like these crazy UIs together and suck up bandwidth and lock up systems, but they look pretty, and little pew pictures back and forth are cool. But I would much rather see like the advanced search data, the raw data.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. When some of the questions that we get on some of our demos are pretty shocking, because it's a dashboard, like the assumptions just go through the roof. It's like, It's like, do you do AI? Can it flush my toilet? Can I turn my light on by logging into the dashboard and clicking the button? So, but it's very interesting. But I mean, it's crazy because that stuff really attracts a lot of businesses. Even though we know as pen testers that the real stuff. Exactly. They just like the bells, the charts, and the whistles. Bells and whistles.
I'll tell you where it goes, and I learned this in my last company with my CISO. He was very open about it. But any tool that has a dashboard, we had one specifically that the VC funders that we had actually funded them as well. So we were kind of forced to have their service, and it looked at like open web ports and that score or whatever. I'm sure you know the company I'm talking about. But those metrics on that site became the reasons if or not executives got bonuses. So anytime they see a dashboard with colors or numbers, it doesn't matter what it is, it becomes some sort of metric.
Right.
And that's what drives me crazy. The real information, what you really need to get to is past the front end. And it's really in the data. So I got into a habit of when I give the CISO a report, I wouldn't give him something out of the UI. I would give him the data and be like, here's what's going on. He said, well, can't you put a picture to it? And I was like, no, it's black and white. It's right there. So yeah, the dashboards serve a purpose, for analysts maybe to take a quick look. But as far as as far as relying on it to like show you the real health or whatever, I think it's kind of misleading. And the whole red, green, and orange color certification for terrorism and for internet, cybercrime, bad idea.
Exactly.
So there was another question. Does your automation pen test tool align with frameworks such as NIST, for example? I know that we talked about that. It falls right in line with NIST, right?
Yeah. So just to expound on it a little bit too. So basically, when I built the platform, it was literally just to automate the same things a pen tester was doing, the exact same thing. Like no pen tester that I know literally like compares their knowledge with any framework. They just know how to get things done and they do it. So that's kind of where we started things off. But as we started, kind of like, I guess making more and more progress, we realized that, all right, well, now we can start to tie some things into it. So like, for example, the MITRE ATT&CK framework. I know a lot of companies who use the MITRE ATT&CK framework are usually like attack sim tools that are based on it. But rather than being based on like these frameworks, we're actually just tying the similarities between the results from these frameworks. We're not trying to like build something that's completely on this framework or completely on that one. But if we do have stuff that relate to them that we can provide, and we can provide that extra value to the customer in the report, then we'll do that.
There's another one. My question is, what are the most common vulnerabilities that Alton and the team find? Based on those common vulnerabilities, what are some key recommendations for businesses to help protect their networks, patching, lack of basic hardening or of builds, etc.? And that comes from Steve. Steve is a leader in security in a bank in the UK.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, appreciate the question too, Steve. So one of the things that I see a lot, and it's crazy that it still exists, is like IPv6 DNS poisoning, right? I wrote a blog about that a while back, and also LNMNR as well, and MBNS. So basically, most pen testers, and probably still, well, most likely still today, when I was about to say go on site, nobody's gone on site today, but when most pen testers get started, the first thing they're doing is they're firing up Responder, right? They're firing up Responder, they're firing up Man-in-the-Middle 6, because these are very, very easy tools to run to exploit very, I guess, common vulnerabilities. And you can get a lot of good stuff from it if it's not configured properly. So just a little bit of background about the DNS poisoning, LNMNR. Basically, they're relying on DNS, right? So when a computer is trying to resolve a DNS name, they have a series of processes that they check. They check their local host file, right? They check their DNS server. If the DNS server has no idea and that system is configured to use like NetBIOS and LNMNR, they're basically going to broadcast on that local subnet, hey, does anybody know the IP address to whatever the DNS name that I'm trying to get to? Well, as an attacker using a tool like Responder, I can respond to that request and say, hey, I'm the IP address that you're looking for. And so what happens is, depending on what that request is trying to authenticate to, like a web service or SQL database or whatever, I can fake that server to that client. And now I can, prompt him for authentication credentials, and I could either get clear text or hash credentials. So that's something that we see a lot, right? And you can turn these things off in group policy. You could set up, like if you have EDR solutions, you can set up, different controls to basically look for these types of packets going across the network. The other thing too is IPv6, right? So IPv6 was enabled by default since Windows Vista. And basically the way that works is if a workstation sees that an IPv6 DHCP server, a DHCP v6 server is available, they're going to ask that server for an IP address, an IPv6 address, right? And so as an attacker, I can basically go into any network and stand up a DHCP server that's giving out IPv6 addresses. And your workstations are going to prefer it over IPv4. And because of that, I can give it my IP address for the DNS server, and it'll work kind of just like the last one, right? Whenever that computer goes out to do anything, resolve a DNS name, it's going to ask me. And that's so in terms of remediation with that, I know like there are some switches that have things like DCP guard, right? So you can basically whitelist authorized DHCP servers. And so if anybody else on the network tries to assign an IP address to somebody, then essentially that'll get stopped at the switch. So those are the very two common issues that I see, and it's been like that for years too.
Yeah, I used to. Well, I still have a LAN turtle, but that was the first thing I would do is fire up responder and WPAD.
Right.
Everybody was spitting something at the device. So
exactly.
Let's talk Go bags, right? So I know as a pen tester, we all have our Go kits, right? So what does your Go bag consist of? So
for me, like just in terms of like a bunch of like some of the common tools that I'm always using. So definitely responder, man in the middle 6, of course, Mpacket, right? Mpacket has a crap ton of tools that are very useful. SMB client, WMI exec, SMB exec. So I like to have that handy as well. Intel and Relay, also part of Mpacket. So I would say Mpacket probably has a lot of the stuff that I use most commonly, but I would say the top 3 were responder, man in the middle 6. And some of the stuff in Mpacket for like Intel and Relay attacks.
Yeah, for sure. So do you have lockpick set and anything else like?
Physical stuff too. I have the USB rubber ducky.
I love mine.
I had some fun with that many years ago. We haven't done a lot of physical assessments lately, but I've got some flash drives just to drop like some Excel spreadsheets on it with some macros to ship out if I need to. I have the Raspberry Pi, which we could use it for actually as a vPen test agent. So we can deploy those out as well to get remote access. I'm trying to think. I have the alpha cards, but we haven't really done a lot of physical, well, not physical, but like wireless assessments since COVID. I think that's really it. That's really about it. Yeah.
So have you gotten into any RF? Like, do you have a ham radio license, or are you looking to dive off into RF at all?
I haven't. I've got some friends that are pretty deep into it, but I haven't myself though.
Gotcha. Ryan's asking if I have a cam in his house because I'm asking all the questions that he's writing down right now.
Yep. Yeah, I used to have a bunch of stuff when I was doing a lot of different types of engagements, but I think since starting Vonahi and just kind of like really honing in on pen testing, I've kind of lost. I don't even know where half the stuff is, like the stuff that I just named. I have like my Raspberry Pi sitting on my desk, but I don't even know where everything else is.
Oh, yeah, my desk is a mess. I've got like 2 Raspberry Pis and a bunch of antennas, and it's cluttered. It's bad.
Yeah, I got in the backpack in the closet somewhere.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, hypothetically, if you had an opening at Vonahi for an entry-level position, what would you be looking for in the candidate? Like what skills would make you go, yes, that's my guy?
Yeah, I like that question too, because this kind of dives into a little bit of education. I know a lot of people who want to get into cybersecurity have the same question, but so I know a while back, degrees were like something that everybody just looked at and were like, oh, doesn't have a degree, you're not qualified. You have a degree, you're qualified. Like me personally, not having a degree and just kind of taking like a non-traditional route, I really can respect like the hard work that people put into like just learning themselves, right? So for me, I like to look at, I like to know their story, like, right, how did they get to where they are? What kind of person, like, in terms of personality, because we all know there's a lot of pen testers out there who are great technically, but wow, try to have a conversation with them and it's just, you don't know if the guy hates you or if he loves you because he's not expressing any emotion, right? So we really like embrace like a good person, right? Like a good person.
Mike's always
right?
saying that you wanna work with someone you can trust, and part of that trust is getting to know them as a person, right, Mike?
Yeah. I've been known to be one of those guys who have been kind of a pain in the ass, though. So I totally get what he's saying.
What? You're so charming. What are you talking about?
Yeah, let me tell you.
You put a lot of trust into these people. How do you know who's worthy of that trust? Like you're hiring someone to get into the nitty gritty of a client's business. Like how do you sleep at night?
You drop $100 bill by their desk and walk off.
Yeah. So there's two different sides of it. Like there's like the culture side, can they blend in with the company? Are they a great person? Things like that. And then there's what you're saying, like in terms of like technical ability, right? So when it comes to like the technical like qualifications, I like to kind of see what they've done in the past. Like, do they have tools on GitHub, right? Have they taken any courses? I don't care about the certification because that's you can cheat to do that, but like I like to know, have they been through any courses that were they're teaching them something? So I like to kind of see do they know Python? Do they know Ruby? Are they going to be an efficient pen tester, right? Do they know any language at all to help them like adapt on the fly? So I think those are some of the common ones, because if you can't code as a pen tester, then what happens when Metasploit throws an error and it's just a typo?
And that's a pain because I remember starting out, like first messing with like tools like that, and I would look at the command line. I'm like, wait a minute, why didn't that work? And I go back and check it. But one thing about open source tools is the documentation is not always the greatest.
Yeah, horrible.
So a command that may have worked 2 versions ago may not work this time. So it goes to show, like being a pen tester and being able to work on the fly. Like that's the kind of stuff you have to figure out. Like that shit's it's not in a book. You have to do some troubleshooting.
Exactly.
I know Cham had a question. Cham, you're unmuted, so if you want to ask your question, shoot away.
Oh, okay. Hi, Alton. So my question is, so your company does automated testing as opposed to manual penetration testing. How did you gain trust from clients when you started your company?
Yes. Oh, that's a good question. So when I first started Vonahi, right? So, well, first of all, let me back up a little bit. It was never my intentions to start a company, right? I just had an idea and nobody listened to my idea. So I had no choice but to do this. And so when I first started Vonahi, I was just a pen tester with a lot of experience doing a lot of stuff, but I didn't really know how to market and sell myself. And I found out that it was extremely competitive. Everybody's doing pen testing. Everybody is a 1099 contractor. And so when it came to the automation side of things, and I think the fact that, I have tools in Metasploit, I have tools in Kali Linux, I have a ton of tools on GitHub, and there's things that people can go to our website and see that we're not just a company saying, hey, we do automated pen testing, and here it is. So they have a little bit of, there's some reputation behind that, but also like the demo, I know a lot of people say, still probably not really, but I always tell them to hop on a call, like let's get on the demo and let's show you. Like, and by the end of the demo, they're like, this report looks better than our last report. We spent, 15 grand on it. And so, I know, I told you,
Hey, Alton, can we offer a free trial to everyone on the Haunted Hacker podcast so they can try out the platform if they want to hack their own network, just like a limited trial so that they can just see how easy it is to schedule a pen test. We'll get with Mike after and we can send them like a special link and they can just try it out for free.
Awesome.
Exactly. And also too,
number of your stylist, because man, your photo on GitHub is pimping.
I gotta check this out.
Man, but it's so good.
So everyone should just go hack their own network.
Oh, Alton looking kind of Hollywood there.
And I try to do a little some, a little.
Guys, that's my graphic skills, right?
Oh, I cut you off.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cham, do you have any more questions for Alton?
Yeah. So today we have the accessibility to be able to collect resources to get to where we want to be and to be able to help us start our career, such as Hack the Box, Udemy, Mentor Dojo, LinkedIn, etc. So how was it for you growing up? How was you able to pull the resources, find guidance and get information to get to where you are?
Yeah, so I think one good thing that worked out in my favor is, so my first cybersecurity company that I worked for full time, I actually applied there 3 years in a row. I would not let them get
Wow.
away with an open
wow.
position without me reaching out. I literally was applying back to, I think they probably hired me because they got tired of me like applying. They were just like, you know what, let's just give this guy a chance. He's
Yeah.
constantly emailing me. And so I started off just doing like basic help desks, like basic support. So at the time we had virtual machines that clients downloaded to deploy, and
What age was that when you started that job?
that was I think 20. Yeah, I was 20.
Okay.
And so basically we were, I was just doing basic stuff, helping the customers get their VMs deployed. And every time, like I talked to the analyst, I was like, hey, whenever you guys doing a pen test, let me know. I want to be right there when you do a pen test, right?
Okay.
And so every time they had a pen test, every time something good came up, they would, bring me over there, and I would literally start studying everything they're doing. And when I went home, I was just like researching, and that was a rinse and repeat situation for like, a good 6 months before they had an opening in an analyst role, and I jumped straight in there.
That's passion right there.
Yeah, research. I try to stress to people too is that research is so important.
Right.
This is not a 9-to-5 job. You don't go in and sit behind a desk and you're proficient just by showing up to work. Like, it takes outside research, outside reading, experimentation. I mean, it has to be a way of life. It has to be a passion,
Right.
or else you're not going to be the top echelon. If you're okay, like, and being complacent with just being an analyst and just doing the bare minimum, that's what you'll get out of it. But for me, and I'm sure for the rest of people, here, is it's a passion, and that passion is 24/7.
Exactly.
I'll wake up in the middle of the night and think about, I wonder if I can add that to an APK or and then I've got to go check it out. I've got to get up and actually do something.
Yeah, that was me 2 nights ago. I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning and I didn't go back to sleep. I was just up coding all night.
Yep. Definitely been there. Cham, any more questions for Alton?
Well, I've got questions for Trami, if
Go
that's
for it.
okay.
Yeah.
So Trami, what did you do before, and what interested you to work for Vonahi?
Yeah, so I've always been into tech, right? So my first job in college, I was working at the Center for Computation and Technology at Louisiana State University. And I was just a webmaster there. So I did all the marketing and the website. And at that place, this was back in 2003, 2004. And they were doing web conferences like we were doing today. So at that time, I was like, whoa, this is crazy. And they're doing all these like awesome technology. They had this, they were using this tool that would measure the gravitational pull and detect it in space so that they can analyze the data. And at that moment, I was already like a nerd about outer space.
Yeah.
And so when I learned about all this stuff, I was like, technology is amazing. So I've always been, that was the moment that I was like, okay, whatever it is I do in life, I want to stay close to technology and see where it goes.
Yeah.
And then I worked for an advertising company and I built a mobile app. So I got to, do app development. And then that was kind of like my front door to get a taste of like what it was like to work with developers and IT. And it kind of just spitfire from there. And then, my brother and Alton actually are friends outside of, the
that's
internet.
a connection. Gotcha.
So yes, which is important because this is the point I want to bring. You never know where your connections will take you.
True.
So I was like, in my mid-20s, and my brother's like, hey, I have a friend. He's a really cool hacker. But he also does photography. He needs a logo. Can you help him with a logo?
That's how it all starts. That's how it all starts.
And it's my younger brother asking me for a favor. So I'm like, if it's your friend, I'll do it for free. I won't even charge him. So I hook Alton up with a logo for his photography business. And then, we stayed in touch, like it was like every now and then if he needed a graphics or some kind of like logo, he'd be like, hey, Trami, can you help me out with this? So we stayed in touch during the years. And then 7 years later, Alton's like, hey, I'm starting my own company. Can you help me with a social media post? So I started out with social media. Then he's like, can you help me build my website? Then I helped him build this
sounds
website.
Familiar.
This is how I get sucked in. And so it was the website. And then after that, it was like, hey, do you want to just come do marketing for us? And then I was like, yes, I do. Because I've already known Alton for 7 years, and I just knew he was such a phenomenal hacker. And it was because of that passion that, like, he's just so happy when he talks about hacking, you know, like I've never seen anyone so happy to talk about their day job. You know, and it's the same with Mike and everyone in this podcast. I talk to everyone here and they just, you guys like freaking love it, you know, like it's Saturday and here we are. So yeah, I think that networking is so key, because I didn't know my connection with Alton would take me here, but I'm so glad it did. And it started 7 years ago with just a simple logo for something that had nothing to do with cybersecurity. But I'm so glad I ended up here, because I'm here with you guys today and I love this community so much. So yeah.
That's a great story. Thank you.
And just to piggyback off of that, so this is crazy. Like you know, because you know when I was younger, I didn't really like understand the importance of connections. Right? I was 19 years old, 20 years old. I was trying to get into cybersecurity. I didn't really care. Like, well, I mean, you know, this is back then, so I can say it now. But I didn't really care about building relationships with clients. I just wanted to hack. I didn't care really, because I was, you know, just trying to increase my skills. But over time, you know, I really realized how important, you know, connections were. It's funny because like Tremi's brother, like we had connected over the internet, like just, I think it was like, I don't know if it was AIM or whatever the case was back then. And we didn't actually meet for like 5 years, but we had this super close like relationship, like bond, like me and her brother, we're like brothers, you know, without ever knowing each other.
Sure.
But turns out, you know, his sister was Tremi, and yeah, it's just like the connections, and you just, like she said, you just never know, you know.
That's cool.
So
Yeah, definitely
cool.
sounds very familiar.
I know. I feel like you guys are all my brothers and sisters on here for sure.
That's funny. I think we got connected through Drake. So Drake approached me when I got back to the States, and you know, sending me stickers and equipment and stuff, and he's like, yeah, you know, here's some stickers from this company I know, and I was like, I gotta check out this website. So I went and checked it. I was like, oh, that's interesting. So yeah, like definitely the graphic design is superb for everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So with that being said, any more questions from the people online other than the 5 of us? So favorite tool to use, and this is for me, favorite tool to use and why on a pen test?
I hate to say it, but just responders in the middle 6. You know, it's like, I know they're very basic tools, right? But they're so effective. Like, and we work with a lot of like, you know, MSPs, and a lot of their clients are small. They've never done a pen test, right? Even some of the largest clients with 70,000 systems, they still haven't figured this problem out, right? So you go on, you get on, I keep saying on site, you get on the network and you fire up these tools. And I mean, it's crazy that things like this still work as effectively as they do. Yeah,
that's why some people ask me, you know, why are you still using that exploit? And I'm like, because it still works.
Yeah,
you know, I'm not going to abandon it and rewrite it if it's already, you know, knocking the wheels off of every car, you know.
Right. Exactly.
So yeah,
exactly.
a lot of the tools have been around for forever, like Nikto and some of the other like web scanning tools. Like they're fundamentally sound, and we still use them today. Nmap,
exactly.
You know, Nmap is
Nmap.
The Hacker's Toolkit was, I believe that it got its cameo appearance in a U.S. military installation where I used to work on the East Coast. They actually had it up on the screen when they went in and did like photo shoots and stuff. It was crazy. So along with that, here's another question. Is there much scope for also offering remediation as part of the product, e.g. identifying a missing patch and then hooking into other tools to apply the patch, the registry key, etc., to find and fix? So from my point of view, as a pen tester, I don't like to identify the vulnerability, exploit it, and then be responsible for helping fix it. Because then that takes out that third party unbiased look at it, because now you've put your hand into the security lifecycle and become part of the responsibility. As a pen tester, I like to keep that separated and just strictly show the raw data. Alton, same?
Yeah, same way too. Like, and don't get me wrong, I know how to fix a lot of these things, but a lot of customers have different types of network environments and different scenarios.
Right.
And so I don't want to become the IT guy. Like if, we say, hey, this is how Microsoft recommends you fix it, but then you fix it and something breaks. It's like, well, I don't manage your network. So it's so hard for me. Like we can, give some advice on what you should probably look into, but yeah.
And we do that too. Like
Right.
reporting, that's a big part of reporting as well, is putting in suggestions for remediation.
Exactly.
I know with the military and government, when I worked at USJFCom, when we got a patch from Microsoft on Tuesday, it didn't get applied on government assets for another week or two. If it was critical, we had 30 days. And they would put that patch through testing in the lab just to make sure that when they deployed it, the admiral's still going to have connectivity over the Atlantic Ocean. So those types of mitigations don't always occur right away. And I know in a bank, we had a 30, 60, 90 rule, right? So 30-day for critical, 60 for medium, and a low is 90 days. And they had to be remediated. So, I mean, there's, like you said, for different companies, there's different restrictions and there's different ways that they actually test patches and deploy them.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So, exactly.
I got a question about, okay, so I know you took an untraditional route in terms of education, right? So tell me, like, I know you started hacking at 11, and then tell me about high school, college, and all that stuff, because it was definitely an untraditional education route, right?
Definitely. Yeah, so for me, like high school was boring. It's funny because like today, when a kid says that, you're like, oh, this guy must be a genius. But you said that 10 years ago, they're like, you said that 10 years ago, they were like, you need this in order to make it in life. So basically for me, I was bored of school, always came home and, hack, play wild, whatever the case is. And I actually got my GED, right? So I got so tired of school. And then plus I went through Hurricane Katrina in New
So for
Orleans.
those that are not in the US, can you kind of explain what the GED is?
Yeah, it's like an alternative high school diploma equivalent. So
it's testing
more
out.
of a, exactly. And so, a while back, I would say that a lot of companies kind of look down at it because you took the shortcut to get out. But I think nowadays, we realize that, the diploma and degree doesn't mean you're smart all the time, right? That just kind of varies on many different things. So for me, I had been through Hurricane Katrina, which I don't know if everyone knows, but I'm from New Orleans, and Hurricane Katrina, like we all relocated all over the place, Texas, Atlanta, Mississippi, and I went to 4 different high schools in like 2 years.
Wow.
And I don't know how it works now, but back then, when you went to different school in the middle of the year, you get a whole bunch of paperwork. You have to catch up on that and do all this homework to catch up with the class. And I was just like, I just want to hack. I just want to learn what's going to teach me how to get into a cybersecurity job. I don't care about waking up to learn about history at 6 o'clock in the morning.
And how old were you at this point?
I was 16.
16. Okay.
Nice.
So I never forget that conversation because I'm the only person in my family that went that way. My mom was just like, I think she knew that she kind of trusted me. And so we had the conversation of, if you're going to get a GED, you got to go to school or work afterwards. So I went to Louisiana Technical College right afterwards. I was 16 in the class with a bunch of adults, and I was like the little baby.
So you were 16 in college when you got into college. You were 16. That's crazy.
I was like the baby taking my A+ and Network Plus at the time.
Wow.
And when I finished 2 years later, I started working at I think I was actually working at LSU in an IT help desk position. It was for like students, but I was at a different school than LSU, so they still let me in. And I went from LSU to working at a federal credit union, managing a network. And then we hired a cybersecurity company to come in there and do a assessment, who do a lot of assessments for credit unions and banks. And then I transitioned to cybersecurity from there.
How did you get that first InfoSec job?
Yeah, so I applied at the company 3 years in a row. I think the second year they tried to offer me a position as a junior network administrator, and I was just getting ready to like finish up in school, and I didn't want to like take the leap already, and kind of like I don't know, it was kind of intimidating. But the third year when they had an opening, I applied for like the first level support, and I felt like that because I was at a cybersecurity company and had access to 20 different people who did pen testing, it was just a matter of time until I was, right under their belt and trying to figure out exactly what they were doing.
Yeah, so there's a question. D may ask, is it not too late for me to start learning cybersecurity? I'm 50 years old. So D may, I'm 47 and I still learn every day. As technology comes out, I grab that and go. It's never too late to learn. I've seen, especially in the junior colleges in Texas, I've seen people in junior colleges as old as like 70, 80 years old, just because they want to learn, because I come into the same school probably that they do, is that when you stop learning, that's when you start dying. So I focus on that. So I have a question for you, Alton. Biggest failure in pen testing and biggest success?
I think the biggest failure, so when I started doing 1099 work right after I left my last full-time job and was working with a big group of cybersecurity consultants, it was pretty, and I guess this is the biggest failure, but I was used to getting like domain admin, finding like good stuff. That was like this was like a thing. Yeah, MS 067, you had all this other stuff that was just still lingering around. And so I remember when I did my first pen test with one of their clients, who they had like 75,000 systems, but we were testing small business units across the company. And so the other pen testers were used to getting, we're used to breaking in or getting access to the environment, things like that. But for some reason, the first pen test that I did, I was like, is this normal to not get domain admin and stuff like that? And they were like, yeah, we got it in the last couple of years. And so like, I really just like, that hit me hard. I was like, I'm used to winning, So I went back and same thing, started studying and trying to figure out what I was missing. But the thing is, you're learning a lot when you work with other pen testers. Everybody have different methodologies, different tools, different strategies. And it's so helpful to like, just collaborate, The biggest win that I would say is we did a pen test. Well, we had a pen test and a social engineering assessment in scope for a large gas company. And we did the social engineering engagement first. We went on site. We got access to the conference room. We were able to, get a reverse shell coming back out. So we went back to the hotel and we did the internal pen test. From that, got domain admin, found a bunch of like confidential stuff, things that they didn't want us to find, of course. And so when we actually finally went on site to meet the client, we told him that we had access to everything. And he was shocked and just like in a good way, right? Like, not like he wasn't trying to like sue us, nothing like that.
Right.
But he was just like, wow, that is so impressive that you guys literally took over everything, or could have potentially took over everything based on, social engineering engagement. So that was really, really cool.
Your favorite industry to test, whether it's financial, gaming, casinos, hotels, what's your favorite industry to go do a pen test in?
I would probably say finance, just because I'm used to it. And I kind of understand like how they, try to protect themselves. I understand like some of the controls they put in place. You see a lot of common scenarios with a lot of companies who have to be in compliance versus the ones who don't. So it's very interesting and very challenging for companies that are mature and have to be PCI and things like that. So it's very interesting to get inside of those scenarios, jumping through the CDE. And
I think the most lucrative one to get into is probably financial, along with medical. Medical seems to be pretty lucrative right now. But I think my favorite industry to test is the gaming industry out of Vegas and the different casinos, because you really get to see some wild numbers being transferred between servers, and that's where I got intimate knowledge on how slot machines worked, and the algorithms they use. So yeah, like I learned a lot in the gaming industry. So have you done any kind of like post action forensics or on a pen test? I know this happened to me a couple times. On a pen test, have you ever ran into a position where you have to switch hats from being a pen tester to doing forensics and report a breach that they didn't know that they had, and you've seen traces on a server?
Actually, I want to say this something like this happened recently where we did a pen test and we saw some issues, and then they I didn't investigate it to that extent, but I was able to see that, because of like the circumstance. It was externally, we found access to a bunch of stuff, a bunch of different files laying around. I told the client that, hey, look, this is a pretty easy thing to exploit. And chances are you've probably been compromised by several different dozens of people. It's probably, I didn't tell them this, but I was thinking like it was probably a playground for you hack this network and you're in a group or something. I don't know, but
so but I was actually part of a startup in California, and it was a voice over IP company, and there was a service provider. Well, they got compromised. One of their call servers got compromised, and the answer that I got when I told them he'd be disconnected in the sandbox was, "We'll just leave it as a honeypot." I'm like, wow, really? Like an operational server, an ops server with, trunks and legit like data, and you're going to turn into a sandbox, a honeypot? Really? Okay. But I see that quite a bit. And then I had, so when you look at a client, right, what is the wildest response you've ever gotten from a vulnerability? Because I know I was doing one for a hospital on the East Coast, and we found the same credentials being used for massive amounts of servers across their infrastructure. And I went back, and it was clear text. The password was clear text. Username was clear text. And I said, you kind of have to stop this, find a different way to communicate. And like, oh, we're not worried about that because we only have one admin account, and they use that password for everything. I was like, really? Yeah. So you share accounts, like you share admin accounts. It's great. So what's the wildest thing you've ran into and had to explain that it's an actual vulnerability?
Yeah, I've dealt with a customer like that before, where the IT guy was like very defensive and made up an excuse for every single vulnerability that we came across. And I felt really bad for the company because I couldn't, all I can do is say, hey, this is what's wrong. This is what could possibly happen, and that's my place, right? I can't go beyond that. And so I felt really bad because we saw this vulnerability year after year, the same pen test, and I was just like, wow. So I don't run across that scenario a lot, but that was one that I remember a lot, where I had to like constantly explain that, using the same local admin password across everything is bad. Opening SMB to the internet is bad, right? It's really bad. Things like that. So
TeamViewer is bad.
What duty of care do you have as a pen tester for the client to help them fix up the problems? Like, is that all mapped out in the scope of the engagement, or like what's typical for you?
I'm sorry, what was that? You said what's the
duty of care, like the
mitigation tactics.
Like how much falls back onto you for them fixing it up? Like, is that nothing?
Gotcha. Well, I mean, I'm sorry, I think I still lost a little bit in terms of like you said, the mitigation. Like, how do we recommend?
Okay, you tell them, okay, this is what's wrong. This is how you should fix it.
Gotcha.
What is the pen tester's duty of care to see that gets
gotcha
fixed? Like, is that something you need to worry about as a pen tester, or is it just that's it from that
That's
point?
it.
That's it. Yeah. Yep.
Oh, happy days.
Yeah, it's
But yeah, I mean, it goes back to like taking a case to a specialist, right? A legal case to a specialist, having him look it over, and then going to the judge and having him look it over. And so everybody's involved in the process, so nobody's responsible. With pen testers, we identify the problem. It's their infrastructure. It's their responsibility. It's their licenses. It's their patching servers. It's their data. So we give them the advice on how to fix it, and it's built into every report. To mitigate this, you need to patch to this level, specific version, whatever. And after that, it's up to them. That goes in the report. It shows how many criticals and highs, and they have to atone for whatever through whatever compliance. And usually, like, you can build. I usually build into like my statements of work and contracts to where I'll give them a reduced price to come back in and verify that everything's been taken care of.
Yep, I was just about to say that.
I mean, that's a natural entryway into further business.
Exactly. Yep. Remediation testing. Yep.
I think it's about removing that emotion from it, not becoming emotionally invested in the.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's just a service,
It's black and white. Like, you have to report it like it's black and white. In the reports, I always tell like junior pen testers, never put I believe or I think.
Mm-hmm.
It is. If it's in black and white, it's in data. It is. Do not
Mm-hmm.
leave room for skepticism or
Right.
any other nonsense, because they will try to push it. They see
Exactly.
14,000 eternal blue vulnerabilities on a network. They're going to want to like find a way to get that brush under the rug. And I've even
Exactly.
been offered more money on a pen test to make results go away. And that's the industry. A lot of people,
Right.
rely on those compliances to get
Mm-hmm.
funding for their business or to function.
Yep, I've heard of that a lot. I
Mhm.
haven't been offered money, but I've heard of like other people being offered money, like because if they were to not be PCI compliant, then they would lose this huge contract, and all
Mhm.
kinds of things just fall apart. So I've heard of that a lot.
Yeah, it happens every day. And then you get CISOs that, they have to report that pen testing report to the board, once a
Mhm.
year. And if it looks bad, I mean, they're willing to do whatever they can to fix it. So those are the
Mhm.
companies you want to look for to try to get business from, because they're willing to pay out the wazoo for a good rep.
So is once a year like a typical time frame for these pen tests, or is
What
that
do you
kind of
run
the
into, Alton, as far as schedule? What do you run into as far as compliance stuff goes?
Yeah, so especially for PCI, we typically see like once a year pen tests. Even though we highly, especially with the product now, we push like continuous, and we try to get like somewhere very close so that they're not having to like spend the same price 4 times or whatever, like once a quarter. But I usually see once a year. I don't know if I've ever really done an assessment for a client twice in the same year, unless there's like a retest for like PCI or something like that within 90 days.
Yeah, with federal stuff, you'll usually do it probably once a year.
Hmm.
With financial, sometimes it can be quarterly. It depends on the business unit you're testing.
Hmm.
And DoD, I believe, is 1 year or maybe bi-yearly. But they have to have a third party and they have to put out a RFP. So GSA contracts and scheduling is different than commercial.
Hmm.
Um, it just depends on the industry, really. And gaming is constant. Like those guys, I know some casinos that will constantly have a revolving door for pen testing and
Hmm.
pen test companies. They won't stick
Hmm.
to one.
Yep.
a year seems like a very long time. Like especially if I look and see how many new tools and new exploits come out every day. A year just seems like it's like a lifetime. Like
So
so much.
Yeah.
that goes back to one of the biggest complaints I have with return on investment, right? So nobody wants to finance their security groups within their company because they dump money into this cybersecurity. They don't see any return.
Hmm.
All they see is, well, we haven't
Right.
breached, so maybe we can cut back on funding now, and we'll be fine.
Right.
And the return on investment is when you do get breached, how bad is the breach?
Hmm.
How long does it last?
Exactly.
But they don't see immediate return on investment. And I hope they get away from the idea. I think with SolarWinds, people may start to rethink that business model of, well, we haven't been hacked in 10 years. Why should we dump,
Hmm.
$500,000 into cybersecurity? Well,
Yep.
when you look outside the window and you see the rest of the world being compromised, well, there you go.
Hmm.
And it's really up to the pen tester too. I've been brought into companies to do a sample pen test and just to give them the shock and awe to get them sold on MSSP or some type of scheduled routine pen testing.
Hmm. Exactly. Same here too. We do the same thing literally almost on a daily basis, like showing them that value, so that they can actually realize that this could potentially save them, from a pretty serious situation down the road, you know.
And it blows
So.
my mind how many companies don't really realize the impact of a breach. Like a
Hmm.
lot of people, they'll listen to you, but until you do the demo and show them how effective it is and actually give them something tangible,
Hmm.
they don't believe it. And then when they do believe
Right.
it, they're shocked and they're scared and they want to dump money. And I'm like, if you would just open your mind just a little bit and listen to what we have to say,
Hmm.
it doesn't have to be all at once. It's going to be a gradual effect.
Exactly.
But they wait until the last minute, and usually that's way too late.
Yep.
Keith says a lot do pen tests for risk every quarter, internal pen tests for regulation every year, for external. And that's true. It depends on government guidance and compliance. I know that the federal agencies have their own scheduling for testing and their own requirements for RFPs and bids. And in commercial world, there's really not a whole lot relying on scheduling besides PCI.
Mhm.
But there's also disclosure for breaches. So
Mhm.
you can schedule a pen test every quarter and save yourself some heartache when it comes to breach disclosure.
So I've got a
I think it's
controversial question for Alton and you, Mike.
Uh-huh.
Of the vendors, the vendor platforms and products that are out there, which is has you found the most challenging in a pen test, and which, if you are you allowed to say this, and which has been the absolute worst, like what's rubbish?
Like when you're talking like a company or a technology?
Like a vendor, like say someone's got Sentinel-1 set up as their thing, or if you can't answer this question, that's okay. We can do sign language.
I can. Alton may not be able to, but I can. Meraki. I hate Meraki. I really can't stand Cisco Meraki. It's really a pain in the ass when it comes to rogue access points. And the reason why is because it does its job. And that makes things a little frustrating for a pen tester. Huh?
Endorsement in the end.
Yeah. So that, and I really like, so I always say this in all of my talks is I don't hate Microsoft. I love Microsoft because it's kept me in business for over 20 years. So anything Microsoft, XP, I've had point of sale systems that rode on top of XP clients. I'm all for it. Like that's my favorite vulnerability is Windows.
I can totally agree with you. I'm sure Trami's tired of me saying,
yeah, we have a Slack channel and I hear it all the time from the red team, the blue team. It's like Windows this, Windows that. Yeah.
I love Windows. They keep us in business. If it wasn't for them, we'd be broke.
Yeah, it's true.
Yep. Exactly. And that's pretty much all I can say about that.
Yeah. But yeah, it's definitely hard to sell offensive security in the market, right? Because the way I see it, it's almost like, getting your tires fixed, right? No one wants to do it until they have to. And unfortunately, I feel like a lot of the small businesses that we talk to, that's where their mindset is at. They don't understand it. So for them, it's like, well, like they don't see the value in it until something bad happens. And at that point, it's too late, right? Some of these bigger companies with more data, I feel like they have to. But I mean, the 58 million small businesses out there, for them, cybersecurity is like the last thing on their mind, which I think it's kind of sad, but that's why I think it's so hard to be in this industry sometimes is to sell it to others, right?
To sell it to business units is the hardest part. The bureaucracy behind it, especially when you go into like a financial institution or government, being able to sell a platform to a large corporation or somebody with that much bureaucracy, it really takes knowing somebody to get into certain spots, especially with federal government. Like if you don't know somebody, it
always goes down
politics.
To who you know. Exactly. Right. It's always who you know.
Right.
Yep.
And that's the way the industry is as a whole. Like, so I was, me and Steve were sitting on a award ceremony and listening to different vendors talk about what the kids could do with their lives and jobs and whatnot. And what really struck me was these relationships are started early. And it really does take knowing somebody sometimes to get a start. And it's sad that's the way that it works. But with challenges like the Matrix Challenge and having that many kids, 47,000 kids participated in Hack the Box competition for the Matrix Challenge. In the US, I don't know a whole lot of that goes on. That's not centered around a conference. But this is a national thing that the UK does to get people involved in cybersecurity and stuff like that. But I think if we as a community put more effort into designing stuff like that for kids and building that pipeline into business and into startups and into that entrepreneurial mindset, we could be a leader in cybersecurity. Right now, our market's like really diluted with vendors who have been there forever. They're tied into big business. They're not going anywhere, and really, they produce zero innovative products anymore. They just take up market space. So if we can get more people involved in the pipeline and more creative kids, I think that'll change because people are really tired of the same snake oil and smoke and mirrors of, here I have this little box that can protect you against APT. What's in the box? Oh, I can't tell you, but I'm going to charge you 50 grand for it.
Right.
I think those days are over. I think that now we're hitting transparency and kids want to know, they're curious. And I think the market and industry is going to change drastically in the next 10 years.
Yep.
So on this panel, let's see, Trammy has a degree, right?
I do. So
Cham-
I went to,
Go ahead.
I went to college for 4 years, and then I got my master's in 07.
Masters. I thought that was
Yeah.
a golf tournament. I know Cham has her degree because I was at that
Yeah.
graduation. Ryan is like a perpetual student.
Bachelor of Arts in music production.
So I think me and Alton are probably the only ones who don't have a degree on this panel is me and Alton. And it's funny that we are the ones who don't have a degree because pen testers, there's not a whole lot of pen testers I've seen that have degrees. Like
Right.
they rely on certifications because that's what the industry asks for.
Exactly.
But that's such a scam. I really wish there was some regulation body that was over certification companies because it's become highway robbery. 10 grand to sit for a 5-day course where they teach you basically nothing that I couldn't learn out of a manual. Like that's robbery. That's robbery.
It's COVID profiteering,
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have to pay to play the game, right? So they want these kids to be invested. So they say, well, you need X amount of certs before we can give you a job. If you're coming out of school, tell me what student post-student loans has money to drop 10 grand on certification. It doesn't exist. And when you have people like, I was asked to write a course for EC Council, and I started writing it, and I started thinking about it, and I was like, certifications as a whole is an industry. And I can't say that I agree with the industry because to me, it goes back to the book of Eli, right? I don't know if you've seen the movie or whatnot, but the knowledge should be free. The knowledge should be passed down. It shouldn't be something that we sit on and go, oh, we can capitalize on this. We're going to create our own certification to teach people how to use Donald Dick and break into 20-year-old networks. Like I remember looking at CEH version 1, and they were using tools like Donald Dick and the mail bomber, the Unabomber. I mean, that stuff has stopped years ago, but they're making certifications around it and making big money.
Right.
So what does that tell people that, getting into cybersecurity? Well, if I can pass a test, I can get a Lexus.
I think that guy that scoured the internet for the free resources and taught himself everything is worth way more than someone who's just gone and paid $15.99 for the month or whatever the courses were. But how do you show that to an employer? How do you go, yeah, well, I researched everything myself. I learned it. I found the resources.
What I did was I just challenged the test, and it pissed Sands off, and they tried to tell me I was cheating because I passed 5 tests in one day. And I was like, no, your tests suck. Like they really suck. And they put
50 grand they didn't get from you, buddy.
Yeah. And it's because to challenge the test back then, this is before they had like proctored events where you could take it online. And the test, I believe, was like $300 a pop, as opposed to spending $1,500 a week for one certification. So I thought, I know this stuff. I looked at the syllabus and thought, I'll just challenge it and see what happens. I'll challenge the first one. If I pass it, I'll buy 2 more. And that 2 became multiples. And I get a phone call from Sands saying that I couldn't download my cert because they had to put me through an ethics board to make sure I didn't cheat. And I thought, this is horrible. But that's certification right now. Like they make you go take a test. They make you go to a proctoring center and you got to take time out of your schedule. They're not paying for it. That's a requirement to have a job. And I don't think that's fair. I think that people should be able to come to communities like this and learn and get free knowledge. And if you want to secure the internet for the future, and you want to secure the internet for children and for people, why are you charging for certifications on how to secure it? It seemed like that would be like counterintuitive.
Right.
I don't know. It's just me. I could go on a rant for days about certifications. So, but anybody getting into the industry, there are certain requirements. Some of us were here before the industry was an industry, and so we kind of got grandfathered in, and they feel sorry for us. But you're going to have some sort of certification. Just trust me on this. There's documentation out there. There's manuals you can download. There's study guides that will prep you for your test, and you can challenge your test on your own. There's no reason to spend 10 grand on a course unless you really just don't know the material and can't learn it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
So anybody else? Let's see. Then how to get the appropriated learning without being scammed. Okay, that's a completely different issue. How many people on this panel have been approached on LinkedIn by somebody from a foreign country and said, what certifications do you want? Every day, at least twice a day. Hey, do you want a certification? We offer these. And I'm like, no, I don't. And, if your company was worth its weight, you wouldn't be cold calling people on LinkedIn.
Right.
Just look at the jobs that you want, do some market research, look at, people who hold those positions and talk to them, and get involved in a community like our community or whoever's community, and get to know the people that hold those actual jobs.
I think that's key right there, is to know what you want. Because we recently interviewed, a group of students that graduated from a cyber boot camp, and we interviewed some that really knew what they wanted. They're like, yeah, I'm really into the offensive side. I want to be a pen tester. So it's like it's easier to get the resources and the mentorship that you need when you know where you want to go. And then we've got some students that are so new to cyber. They're like, well, everything seems interesting, so and they don't know where they want to go yet. So I always tell them the first thing to do is like find out what you want, right? And then go from there. But some of them know, and then some people don't. I didn't know what I wanted to get into until recently. So yeah, I think that's the key right there. And I think you hit the nail on the head with that comment, is like find out what you want and then reach out to that person and then figure out how they got to where they are.
So here's the question for the panel. Role models and why. Let's start with Ryan.
Role models, as in who are mine, or what do I think? I think we hear a really interesting thing, that whole niche thing, like, because I'm super new to that, like actually working in this industry. And that came back so many times. Oh, well, what is it that you actually want to do? And like, it's such a broad topic. Like, I challenge each one of you guys in the panel to actually just help one person at today, like make that decision. Like, if so, it's such a hard thing to figure out when you first start, because there's so much stuff. What do you concentrate on? So I just started concentrating on everything until something stuck. So, but I had a little bit of help. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, so that brings up a good point for me. What about, like, in the military, we have the ASVAB, right, for the US. Is there a way to easily gauge kind of where someone has an aptitude?
Well, there is, right? So when you look at like OSCP, and they set up, you have a lab environment, you have a testing schedule to go by, you have an end of testing time frame. They want to see how you operate within the offensive environment. So there's those types of tests, but there's no really like test that says, okay, you want to get into cybersecurity, here's the different principles in cybersecurity. Let's see how you test. And maybe that might be something that might be good, give like a mixture of questions and then see where people's mindset really falls in. Because that can be a tough decision, right? If you're not geared for blue team, if they stuck me on a blue team, I would go absolutely fucking insane. Like, there's no way I could do it. So there should be something to help people gauge where they believe they should be, and give you data to prove, that's definitely the type of person you are. And I think it goes back to personality as well. I was talking to kids earlier today, and I was telling them that, it's all about psychology, right? How do you think? When you address a problem, what do you look at? And it takes a special person to be able to do the red team. It takes a special person to do blue team, and no one's better than the other. It's just you try to switch those roles with people who are wired for those specific roles, and you're going to have feral cats running around. Like there's no control after that, because I would go absolutely insane. So Alton, role model.
Yeah. Who do I look up to, or
Yeah. Like when you look at your career, who do you
Yeah.
model yourself after? Like what traits do you go after, and who has those traits that you're trying to model?
Yeah, I think for me, I'll try to like, stay humble, of course. I do like to give back too. So when people come up to me to ask questions, it's crazy because like, I do photography. I have a good amount of followers on Instagram. And from time to time, people reach out and be like, hey man, I know you probably won't respond to this, but like, how did you get started?
Yeah.
I always take the time to respond,
Yeah.
always. I don't care how busy I get, because I know I was in the same shoes at one point as well. So I always want to give back, help, be humble, I just want to succeed, and I just want people around me to succeed. And, so that's kind of like how I have been and how I try to stay. I don't have to try to stay that way, but that's how I am.
Yeah. Gotcha. Chan, what about you? As far as role models go in cybersecurity, what traits or what person do you think has those traits that you want to model your career and your existence in cybersecurity after?
I think I could say I don't really have a role model. I follow a lot of people on LinkedIn because each and every one of them have like different traits, different characteristics that I can learn from. So, they're either have their own company or they work for a company, and they're involved in a lot of things that are part of cybersecurity, and feeding free information like knowledge, like, hey, do this, hey, do that. Like it's nice stuff to pick up on. So I don't really have a role model, but I like to look at different people for different things.
Gotcha. Cherami, what about you?
So I don't have one in cybersecurity because I'm very much like Chum in that aspect. I follow so many people and I'm like a sponge. I just want to learn a little bit from everyone because I think you can learn a little bit from everyone. But I do really like Alan Watts when you mention role model. So he is a Western philosopher that introduced a lot of like Buddhism and Eastern culture to Western culture. And there's a lot of talks that he gave that are just very enlightening, and they really resonate with me. Just like, it's just broader things like how do you find your purpose in life? How do you, what's the meaning of happiness? So I find like a lot of those big questions he answers, and it helps me kind of like find myself. And then from there, I just find like-minded individuals that I can kind of learn and grow with, and just surrounding myself by positive people all the time is kind of the path that I take. I always try to go with good energy. I'm a huge believer in that. So anywhere where there's like positivity, good people, like good vibes, sharing knowledge, and like uniting. I think humans are the best when we can work together, understand our strengths and weaknesses, and understand that we don't have to know everything, and it's okay. And then to learn from others. I think that's the best thing. And that's why I'm a part of this podcast, because I feel like everyone here is just so nice and open to just connecting and learning from each other. So in a sense, I feel like everyone in my life that I've gotten to know through this community and in cybersecurity, you all have been a role model at some point in my life. So
that's scary.
I don't think it's scary. I think it's great.
So my role model is Thor, because Thor carries a big band hammer.
Yes.
No, seriously. I don't know. I think that as far as like role models go in the industry, I have people, like real people in the industry that I look up to. Snake, Jeremiah Grossman, Ralph Eshmandia, good friends of mine that have given me bits and pieces of knowledge as I went along, and Jason Street as well. Jason Street was really instrumental when I started speaking and was kind of like super nervous about speaking and being on a stage or whatever. So him and Ralph really helped cultivate that and make things easier. A few tips that helped. But I think as far as, other role models go, I would have to say probably JFK as one of them, because he wasn't afraid to stand up for what he believed in. And I think that
agreed.
so there's a terminology or a motto that I like to go by. It's if you don't stand for something, you fall for everything. So I think that's important for people to think about when they get into the industry, is that our industry is very ego driven, very, very ego driven, very cutthroat, very competitive, very I know more than you type deal.
I know it's hard to find friendly people in this industry.
I know it really is.
So
That's
you have to be stoic, right? So that's one thing I've had to learn with Grace over the past couple months through a fire hose, is that, you know, it's not always graceful to fight back, and you have to just be stoic. And I think that some of the people that showed that throughout history in the U.S. is like Abraham Lincoln and JFK and people like that faced diversity and really stuck their guns. You know, they didn't change for anybody, and that's just the way it is. And I think that in our industry, you have to do that to make a name for yourself. Like, stick to what you believe in, research it, back it up with data, and present it, and fight for what you believe in.
Did you encode that?
What's that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Multiple times.
Alton, can you figure out how to automate that?
I know, right?
I think it's already been automated. It was automated against us.
I found the reverse. I found wonderful people in this industry. Like, I came from the music industry where everyone's all about them. It's just sycophants and big egos everywhere. And I found the cybersecurity industry a refreshing change. Like the ratio of wankers to good people is really good. Like,
but those trolls can be a headache, man. They really can.
Yeah.
God. But yeah, I mean, and then you get people who I hate the term, and I refuse to be called this on any podcast or any conference, is a subject matter expert. So when someone uses the word expert, it's a total turnoff. If you're getting into the industry and you make it to a point where you're speaking and people look for your advice, never call yourself an expert, please. Because none of us are. New technology comes out. As we're speaking right now, I'm sure there's like 2 or 3 technologies being released that we know absolutely nothing about. So to call ourselves experts is kind of egotistical.
Agreed.
So anything else from the people that are watching? If you want to post another question in chat, we'll address it. So Port Slug says a lot of people want to be a pen tester since it is fun and sexy. I appreciate the compliment, Port Slug. Like, I didn't know you felt that way, but yeah, it happens. I'm kidding. They do. They see what they see on TV, like NCIS, and you know, and we talked about this in the thing with the kids today. Is that you know, our jobs aren't always neon green matrix code falling from the sky. You know, it's reporting, it's 24/7 work, it's working in 2 different time zones at the same time. Traveling, getting up at 5 a.m. to give a conference overseas. I mean, it's a lot of work. It truly is. And that's why I say, if you don't have a passion for it and you're doing it just for the money, be prepared to prepare yourself for burnout, because it takes a passion to get through some of those long hours and some of the hard work.
Very true.
Yep. Exactly. Yep.
I don't have anything else. Anybody else have anything? One more question. So Colin Hardy did this thing with, I can't remember who he was interviewing, but he would say a word, and the first word that popped into mind, you know, the person answering the question should answer it. So I got something a little different. If you were a superhero, Marvel or DC, who would it be? Alton first.
Oh, I'm so bad at this part. Oh man, I don't know. I know that's kind of lame, but
I would see you as like an Iron Man, really big into tech, nice cars.
Suave as.
I mean,
Well, GitHub says it all, man.
So what about you, Trey?
So I'm a fan of the Scarlet Witch. So there's not much about her, but she's super powerful, and yeah, she's my favorite.
Cool. Cham, what about you?
I think it has to be Wonder Woman.
Wonder Woman. I can see that. Ryan, what about you?
I'm DC, man. Batman, no superhero. It's just enough capital, mate. You can make anything happen, you know?
Right.
And a good
Right.
partner. Yeah.
Totally down with that. I was about to say the same thing. Batman, because he's not really a superhero. He's more like a tech wizard.
Yeah.
And my other favorite is Deadpool, the unsuperhero.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, he carries the big band hammer too. Totally dig that.
I woke me up at like 3 o'clock in the morning the other day to watch Deadpool because I couldn't sleep.
No,
Perfect. Perfect woman.
nice. So, Alton, do you have any questions for us? Feel free to, this is an open forum, and I mean, this is how we work. It's an open community, and we speak freely, and that's just the way it is. So, if you have any questions for us, shoot away.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think I have any questions. I just want to, if anybody has any questions for me, even outside of this, I just want to be available. I know sometimes, kind of asking some questions that people may seem personal. May think some people may want to ask questions that they think are too personal, but I'm super transparent. All right, I don't have anything to hide. I don't have any knowledge that's just sitting in the corner somewhere. Like, oh, So I just want to help. So I mean, if anybody has any questions about like how to get in the industry, how is it like starting your own business, or like, what my path was even further. I mean, I'm glad to talk about that. So
how can people get a hold of you? Email address or website or Twitter? What do you prefer?
Yeah, probably Twitter. I think Twitter, well, probably LinkedIn. I'm more on LinkedIn. I wake up and I look at LinkedIn. I don't really look at Twitter too much nowadays, and there's a lot of like stuff.
Nonsense. Yeah.
Yeah, but LinkedIn is a good one. So I also have a personal website if you want to go to altonj.io.
Cool.
By Tremi. So, so that's basically my personal story. There's some contact information on there. I'm into photography, cars, pen
Cool.
testing. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, altonj.io.
Yeah. Yeah, my website kind of sucks right now, but we're working on that.
We're working on it.
So with that being said, Alton, I really appreciate you taking the time to spend your Saturday evening with us, and welcome to the haunted house finally.
Yeah,
I'm really excited to see what happens with the product, and if you guys eventually sell or what happens. It's exciting road.
Yeah, definitely appreciate the opportunity too, and yeah, definitely stay tuned. We have some like I'm full of ideas. Like I feel like we're just getting started with the with everything. So there's so much more stuff that I want to bring to the product. So yeah, I appreciate the opportunity.
If you need some help or you want somebody to be a sounding board, I'm sure that you can hit me up or bounce off the community. So that's what we're here for.
Absolutely, I appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you guys for tuning in today on your Saturday. I'm amazed that people show up. So thank you guys so much for coming and joining the podcast today.
See you guys next weekend.
All right. Have a great weekend, everyone.